Cal Lane is an internationally acclaimed artist known for turning ordinary objects into lacy artwork. She holds a bachelor degree in fine arts from Nova Scotia College of Art and Design and a master's in fine arts and sculpture from State University of New York. Her pieces are all about sort of the contrast between these sharp, large metal sculptures and the sort of lacy structures that she makes with them. So without any further ado.
Just give us a little bit of your background, kind of a general overview. What do people need to know about you to kind of contextualize this conversation?
We'll just go on to the thing.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for
coming. When I was asked to come, I thought, oh great, I love the UPers. They're so awesome. I was here years ago. I come from the west coast of Canada on Vancouver Island. And in '97, I started my undergraduate degree in Nova Scotia, and a friend of mine, my best friend at the time, said, hey, let's ride our bikes there, because he was accepted into school over there as well in philosophy. And so I said, okay. And we started in May of '97 and had no idea if we were going to be able to do it. We were on the ferry and from Vancouver Island to the mainland, and somebody said, oh, where are you heading? And we said, Nova Scotia. and he just laughed at us. But we made it. But so as we started biking across Canada, we hit the Great Lakes and decided to come into the States. So we ended up here. And just before we got to Marquette, we were running out of water, which was a problem. And we saw this little bar, just like it's about 30 miles before Marquette. And I heard all these drunk guys in there. We tried to sneak in and get some water, and they just, there was like a dozen of them accosted us and made us sit down with them and talk. And one guy ran out and sat on my bike and rode it around the parking lot. But they took us home with them. Like at this point, we've been on the road for a month and a half, sleeping in tents. So this was our first time sleeping in a house, and the U-Peers, that was the first time I ever heard what U-Peers were. and they brought us home, and they fed us and gave us way too much to drink all night till 4 a.m. So the next day I couldn't get on my bike. But they left us at their camp on a beautiful lake. They said, hey, stay as long as you want. We got to go back to work in Marquette. And so that was my introduction to the U-Peers, and so I'm so happy to be back.
I think a lot of people have stories like that up here, honestly.
So friendly, yeah.
And then I met a batch of people, and then we stayed at their camp for a couple days. Yeah. So
do you want me to start with some images and
yeah, go ahead.
Talk about? It took me a while to get to go to art school, both with financially and confidence-wise. I was 30 when I started my undergraduate degree. So before that, I had a lot of other occupations and lives, and it's art is hard to make a life from. So one of the things I think we talked about, I grew up in my mom's hair salon, and I grew up in a very working class situation where, I was told I was going to be a hairdresser because you're lucky to have any kind of job. But I was a tomboy. She fired me like weekly because I had dirty fingernails and I never combed my hair and had work boots on. And then one day I looked in the newspaper and it said, become a welder. And I went, oh, of course, that's me. Mm-hmm. So I went from hairdressing to trade school, became a welder. And then I worked for this welding company for many years, and then I ended up in art school. Art has always been part of my life. That's sort of how I've always communicated with the world in a sense, or tried to make sense of the world. I feel like sculpture or making things is the best place in between your head and the world you live in, working with materials and trying to make sense of the world we live in. So it's something that I've always done, but and I really liked starting art school at a bit of an older age, because I had this past and working as a female welder for all those years, I had a lot of, gripes. So
Yeah. Can I ask, I'm curious about, so pre-art school, you were a full-grown adult, in a professional trade. What was your kind of creative practice like before that
Before
kind of
art
more,
school?
yeah, before that kind of more formal training? Like
I
what?
did do a painting degree first. I've always been a drawer. I did lots of things. I was even a map maker for a while too. My first job actually out of high school, I got a job as a map maker before computers, so I hand drew topographical maps just because I was known to do all these really intricate drawings when I was in high school, and they just thought I'd be perfect for the job, and I did that for a while, which was amazing, a lot of fun. And then I just never actually thought art was going to be my career because I didn't really come from that environment where it was encouraged at all. So, for a while I wanted to be a veterinarian, so I worked in a vet hospital for many years. But yeah, so once I got to Nova Scotia, I got a job as the metal shop technician as well, and I taught welding for a school of architecture. So that helped me get through school as well. It was always a part of my life, like we were talking about earlier. But I was, as far as an artist goes, I like the idea of having a material first and then an idea first and then choose the material as opposed to having the material and choosing the idea. But it goes back and forth. So I work in all different materials, but steel has still been very close to me.
Yeah, and that's kind of what some of your more recognizable,
Yeah.
some of the bigger pieces, yeah. And so maybe, do you want to talk about some of these images?
Yeah, so when I first started in art school, I started making these industrial doilies, I call them. A lot of my work is just poking fun at expectations, both with material and image, and gender was always something I wanted to play with, the expectations that come with occupation and everything we all do. So these pieces, this is about a half-inch thick steel that I cut with an oxyacetylene torch, which I just love the process too. Like the process of cutting steel with a torch was always such a beautiful thing to do. This big flame.
Yeah, it's dramatic.
It's dramatic.
And you have something at the end of it that's really transformed.
Yeah. So I started making rust prints off of the objects a lot too. So I have a few rust prints off of some of these that I basically put the steel object onto a canvas and let it sit there for a few months until it stains it, like a monoprint. I started getting larger and more structural. I'm making these, I call them flying buttresses, and the pattern I cut into them was a pattern that my mom used to put on my dress. She always made my dresses, and she always put the same little lace pattern around the cuffs, so I cut that into these.
I think I recognize that lace pattern.
Yeah,
I've
it's
seen
called an
that
eyelet pattern. It's
Yeah.
like on everything.
Which, I don't know, that's kind of interesting because like lace, I feel like the steel structures and steel components have a language when you know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
A friend of mine that did some fencing for us then later saw a piece of wire crushed on the ground and immediately knew it was where it went on the fence,
Funny, yeah.
And I think these lace, like, do they come from somewhere? Because this lace is also, they're patterns with names and stuff, and they have
I use a
of,
lot of lace, and some do come from somewhere, and some I wanted to keep it more maybe generic, because I remember I do these sifting pieces too, which I'll show some pictures of. And I remember when I was in college doing graduate school, they were asking me, what's the connection to the lace, personal connections, and I actually wanted to sort of push the personal away from my work. I wanted it to be more of a universal language and not to be about me and not to have, So I actually like the paper doilies and all the really cheap kind of lace things. I've learned a lot about lace in my time. So the lace came out of actually this kind of not liking it because I didn't like dressing in dresses as a kid and things like that. Mom was always putting them on me and I'd be crying, like, I look so stupid. So I actually really hated lace. But, as now, though, I keep getting invited to these shows about, I love lace shows. And I'm like,
Oh,
sorry to say this,
interesting.
but it was more of like an anger thing for me.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
and these pieces talk about structure. This is my first big piece I ever did. And it was I finished my undergraduate degree. And talking about limitations, I think, was really important to me. First, because it's nice to, when somebody, I've just been the person that says, oh, you can't do that. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I hated being told that. So, but being a metal worker is a little overwhelming when you get out of school. It's hard to get, how do you get that equipment and a shop and all that kind of stuff? So the first tool I got was an oxyacetylene torch, because I got it at a garage sale for $70, I think. And so the only thing I could do was cut steel. So I was offered this big commission, and I didn't even have a studio at the time, so somebody loaned me a space. And I went to the scrapyard, got some I-beams, and just started drawing these lace patterns that all came from edging and ribbons. I draw them directly onto the I-beam, and then I cut them with the oxyacetylene torch. And I named it Fabricate because, as a person that builds things, they're called fabricators, and it directly comes from fabric and structure.
Yeah, it's all related. I wanted to point out with this, especially with that first image with the steel panties hanging off the edge of the anvil, I feel like in a lot of your pieces, some more overt and some more subtle, there's kind of a little wink in it, and kind of something that's a bit of a joke going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a serious topic, but I like to play with it and make fun of it,
Yeah, sort of like in a visual humor that's kind of deadpan in a way because of the material.
Good.
Yeah. Like iron and steel and stuff. They're serious materials, but there's something that's a little like, yeah, there's a pair of panties hanging off the edge of an anvil.
Exactly. Yeah. So I threw in some process shots just to show what I do. I use a lot of found objects because I like having an object that has a past, has a history, that people know what it is, and then sort of carve into it. And that's the other thing I like about using torches. It's because I'm an obsessive doodler. It's a little bit in between drawing and carving, which I really love that process. So I was asked for the Philadelphia Design Museum to do a piece about lace, because it used to be a lace factory. And they had this beautiful collection of old lace. So I went down there and chose a piece, and I got this 1,000-gallon oil tank and drew the lace onto the tank. I used a projector, projected the lace, painted it on. Takes a lot of cleaning.
Yeah.
And then cut it with the torch.
You say that you kind of start with the idea and pick the material, but the nature of this work spends an awful lot of time with the material.
Yeah.
So at least these pieces, I think that you're kind of sifting pieces and stuff are maybe less hands-on intensive, but is there something about steel in particular that's...
Yeah, I mean, I use a plasma cutter a lot now, which is a little bit less labor intensive than a oxyacetylene. But I think for me, when I first started trade school, that's the first thing you learn is how to cut steel. And I was just blown away, let's light this flame, and then it cuts through 2-inch thick steel. It was really a beautiful thing physically. And so in some ways it has the same effect as drawing, because especially you put your helmet down, you can't see much, and then you're just carving away at this piece. The process is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
This is the sort of the finished piece, and then the projection of it. More oil tanks. I did a lot of work with oil tanks in the 90s, in the early 2000s. This is at the De Cordova Museum in Boston.
I know that a number of these kind of oil tank and oil can pieces are kind of directly related to, there's a little bit of a narrative to them about oil and its kind of journey and its weight in our lives. And it feels like there's maybe a little bit of a commentary element to it, like a political or social commentary element to it. And was that deliberate? I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah,
guess it must have
definitely.
been.
I mean, this is when George
Yeah.
Bush was president, and there was a lot of talk about why the war was happening and if it was about oil and our trying to get away from that. That show had another piece, like I made this sort of Trajan's column type piece out of oil drums that I carved a war into that wound up just like how Trajan's column celebrates the wars of the time. Like with all my pieces, they're political, but they're not specifically about something, because it's really me trying to make sense of what's going on as well, and that's kind of what all my work is more about. I take objects that people make sense. I try to connect to the world too. Like these are the conversations we're all having, and it's confusing and it's complicated, and I'm not saying. I think what I love about the visual language is that there's a lot of mystery and ambiguity in the visual object, and I want to celebrate that. If I try too hard to get specific about something I'm trying to say, it never comes out right. It looks too, I don't know, obvious, didactic, or yeah. So it starts from a political place, but then it kind of, I let it flow to a little bit of logic, a little bit of mystery. So I'm going to show you some of my sifting pieces too. I don't just do steel, so
No.
but I really like pattern, and I like the contrast between domestic and industrial a lot too, and male and female, and contrast in general. So I started sifting. This is sugar over tires. I like how you could still see the tractor tire pattern with the white lace pattern. And then I started sifting dirt on floors. I filled gallery spaces. I filled warehouse spaces. I sweep them up as well. I did this one in Washington, D.C. I went around and sifted dirt all over the city. It was.
This is kind of a good example that I thought might be interesting for people. This sort of very ephemeral way of working where the dirt's going to blow away. And the steel's going to last for a very long time. Like, all art kind of ultimately does have a timeline. It's just whether that's, 100 years from now or whatever. But you work with materials that are either really going to last, or you work with materials that'll maybe be gone by the end of the day in the right setting like this. And so do you want to talk a little about, like, how could someone who's used to a beautiful painting that maybe you could own,
Right, yeah.
and you can't own this?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about it, is that to get away from that, trying to make an object, a sellable object or something, sort of inhibits your creativity, I think. And I think, like I was saying also too, with focusing too much on steel, I think inhibits your creativity. Like, I think what I try to do is just, like Hunter was saying, just try to be the most creative as possible and be free. And especially ephemeral pieces is about the process, and knowing that it's going to go away. I think it makes it more like a dance or a performance in a way, and makes it more special. A lot of people I find have trouble with it because of that. Oh, how are you going to sell that? And I think, oh no, that's too bad that we think about how it's going to be sold and make money before actually just experiencing it.
Yeah, it draws, I think that these dirt pieces in particular are a great example. It kind of draws such a focus on the context, where, like, that dirt is under people's feet all the time, but you arrange it in a lace pattern on the sidewalk, and suddenly you stop. And the context of a lot of things definitely make a difference, but we're often not aware of that effect on things, like the effect of context on what we're looking at.
Yeah, So I started sifting it on people as well. Which was a lot of fun. I was out with, when I first started doing this, I thought, oh, you know, who's going to let me, I was out with some friends at a bar, who's going to let me put dirt on them and photograph them? They all went, me. I went, all right. All right. Yeah. So I've had so many great models. I've done this on so many people. And I still do these whenever I meet an interesting person and say, do you mind if I put dirt on you? I'd love it.
They're interesting because it's kind of this lace pattern that you work with in, again, these kind of industrial materials, and there's kind of a joke to it there, but here it becomes kind of really sort of intimate. The delicacy of it is sort of what's forward, and the kind of, ephemeral's the word, you know, it'll evaporate when they move, you know.
And they're very morbid too, which the first person, she was my first model. She was the first person that said that night, and she recently passed away. Oh. And, you know, I've got this she's got dirt in her eyes, and so I have a hard time looking at these ones, like especially the full one, because it felt at the time, you know, you're burying a person, and it's very intimate, and they have to stay very still, but I always feel bad going through this with them, but after they've all said it feels really good, like it's almost like a spa treatment of forcing yourself to stay still and breathe slowly and feel this cool dirt on them. Yeah. You can see the full tablecloth with this one.
Yeah, they're kind of.
And this one is funny, because I do like that contrast of the tough and the delicate, and Phil here, the man, is a friend. My husband owns a bar, so a lot of my models come from his regulars. And Phil's a regular there, and he's nice and muscular. And I asked him, "Oh, can I do this to you?" And he goes, "Not without my wife." Oh. And I didn't really want the sort of romantic, sweet photo, but I end up really loving it. Having them together is really beautiful.
Yeah, it is really. It is interesting. They're kind of spooky and intimate at the same time.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And then I did it on a few really large scales. This is in Australia. I was in the Sydney Biennale there, where I cut up a shipping container, and I had this really big warehouse space to fill too. So I used, funny, so this was 10 years ago, I guess, and I did this pattern, and the lace that I was using was a piece of lace that my parents got as a wedding present, and this opened on their 50th wedding anniversary, so it was a bit of a strange coincidence.
That's interesting.
I missed their wedding anniversary, but I said, hey, I'm using,
yeah,
I'm memorializing.
Related.
And we were talking about this, so I usually just use dirt because I don't want to, the amount of romance and decoration I want to sort of, wind back. Because otherwise it loses that sort of raw conflict. So I never wanted to use color or sand or anything. I didn't want it to be too beautiful. I wanted it to be, the dialogue to be about decoration, not be decorative necessarily. But because it was Australia, I wanted to use the sand from Australia, and this one's in the Middle East, so I used the sand from the desert there.
Do you feel like using the sand did make them into decoration, like you were worried about, or were you?
Well, I'd be more curious on how they looked at this piece, because this was in the Islamic Arts Festival, and their relationship to Islamic patterning, which is so beautiful. It's just how other people look at it, I guess. I'm not sure what that is, but I try to connect to where the context is and the place is, but not speak too much about it because I'm not from there, and I can't be so I don't know. It's like a commingling of cultures for me. So I don't know. I think here in Australia and in the Middle East, I don't find it too decorative, but yeah. And so this is, I do a lot of wordplay too, so this is the heart wrench. And I have a little bit, what I liked about this too, that it's an adjustable wrench, so the heart breaks. I made a little video, I think. Oh, there we go. And then comes back together.
It's an interesting heartbreak because you have so much control over it. You
Control
know,
of my
like
heartbeat.
you control
I never
the,
thought about that,
the
yeah.
pace and the space of
That's
the
right.
break.
Break it slowly. And these are the pieces that people seem to know me for, the
Yeah.
shovels.
These were for an installation in New York, am I right? Or
They've been
something
in
similar?
a lot of installations in New
Okay.
York. Like, yeah, so much so I just can't even look at them anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I did a subway station.
That's what I was thinking
Yeah.
of. Yep. Yep.
Actually, I have a little video on that if you want to see it.
Want to see a video about shovels in a subway?
It's about, so the MTA commissioned me to do a subway station. So they wanted just these sort of panels that run along the subway in Brooklyn. And I ended up using one of my shovel patterns, but I wanted to get them laser cut because, you know, it's a lot of panels. And they said, no, we love your hand cut work. No, no. So I made a little video of the making of it. No video.
Sorry, folks. It is one of the well-known pieces, so that is one of the things that pops up if you're searching for information on Kelly.
Yeah,
I really love these ones in particular, and also the car hoods.
Oh, the car hoods.
I
yeah.
just think
Thanks.
they're because of the way that bends. It leans so hard in the relationship of the pattern of the lace and the pattern of rust,
Right.
where it kind of blurs this line of like your effect on the material and the way the material was headed anyways. It
Yeah.
sort of makes you a collaborator in this destructive process,
Yeah.
interestingly.
Yeah. The doily dumbbells.
This has got heavy feminine, masculine
Yeah.
things going on in it.
I'm still in the process of working with these because I'm building the bench, the workout bench as well. So, but it's all like wooden spun legs, and I'm reupholstering the top in this sort of red velvet and tassels, and so it's
So it'll be a
very
glitzy,
luxurious.
lush workout bench.
Yeah. And the panty chain.
Yep.
And the panty stains, of course.
Yep.
This is a very old piece. I just stuck this in because actually I'm not sure why I put it here, but I did this in college. I used, again, the oxyacetylene torch, where I just sort of painted on the grass. It's like Klaus Oldenburg was here.
Yes, Klaus Oldenburg. I was thinking of his name the other day.
And, you know, growing up in a hair salon, I got to use my braiding techniques, so.
I also wanted to ask you, I found information about a cake. I think you're making a wedding cake out
Oh,
of
really?
tires,
You
and you're
found that?
piping.
Yeah, I didn't put any pictures of it because I never totally finished it. But
I was going to ask if you'd finished
I
it. It was
could probably
interesting.
find a picture of it.
Well, you kept on mentioning, like, you could drive on these tires, you know, with their beautiful. Okay, so I don't know if you have images of that in here because it's not finished.
I don't.
They are tires stacked like a tiered cake, and she took black caulk and attached icing piping attachments on the end and piped the caulk on
made
like it's icing.
Black rubber flowers, and yeah, it covered it. And so that first one I did at least 10 years ago has been outside ever since, and it's still fine. It's still, it's still strong. And then I bought a giant tractor tire, and then a big tractor tire, and then it just sort of keeps layering up, and it's all black rubber. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do.
It's a very interesting piece, but and what really struck me about it was just kind of the material usage. Like, once again, this very mundane caulk, which
Yeah.
is just a very common household thing, and So I guess I'm curious, you talk about starting with the idea and finding a material that does it. Did you have a vision of something? Did you need something to pipe and thought
Well, I like
caulk
it.
might work?
I see art as kind of inventions too. I like inventing new techniques with old techniques and vice versa. And that just kind of made sense to me because it had the same nozzle as an icing tip, and I thought, oh, I wonder. I wasn't sure if it'll work. Like same with the dirt sifting, came from watching my grandmother. She would decorate cakes with little doilies and sift icing sugar through it. I thought, oh, I wonder if I could do that on a big scale with dirt. And so it's just playing with, like, I'm still a baby or something here. I'm just playing with materials and throwing poop on the wall. Yeah. So the tires were, the tire tread always reminded me of the patterns of braiding,
Yes.
that sort of back and forth crisscrossing. So that's what made me start to put hair on tires. I've been doing a whole series of these hairdresser tires where I put hair on it and then curl it and mimic the tread pattern with the hairstyles.
Yeah, I know that I think a lot about how you see patterns repeat, like the way water will make sand move in
Yeah.
a way that echoes the grains of wood, that echoes like the marbling of meat. These patterns just appear over and over and over again. And so that you're speaking about the tire treads, hair braiding,
Yeah, exactly.
and the rust and the lace on the car hoods and stuff, where it
Yeah.
does
It's
the
all
same
connected.
things. It's very interesting that a couple of them just sort of permeate.
This was I don't have the video, but I started. Did you ever make like shrunken heads as a kid?
With the apples?
The apples, you
Yeah.
carve heads and they shrink into. So I, was doing lady parts and make them because I'm in. Hey, I just turned 53 today, so
Yes. Yes. Happy birthday.
thank you. So age is a thing for me now. So I took this apple and I carved. There's a few different ones, but and then I photographed it every day as it rotted and as ants crawled on it. And so that's the first stage. And that's the last stage. That's me now.
All is entropy, even ourselves.
Picking the ants out of my bum. This is the shipping container I did in Australia. So I was there for a couple of months, which was really awesome. Working on this island, Cockatoo Island, which is, like a lot of places in Australia where it was a penitentiary. And so they gave me a shipping container and I just drew this pattern on it, tried to make it like a bit of a prison, and then carved it away. And now it's at the National Gallery there.
Can I ask about some of these ones that are like less reflective of lace and have little characters in them? They kind of remind me of medieval iconography, and they also remind me of maybe the cartoonist Linda Barry, if you're familiar with
Linda
her.
Barry. I love
Really?
Linda Barry.
Okay, I was just wondering if
I haven't
like
thought about her in years.
I just think she's so brilliant, but
Funny. Oh,
I just
that's
see
awesome.
that kind of
Yeah.
that communication where it's not necessarily a specific representation, but it's kind of a cartoon of something.
Yeah.
So when you go about choosing images where you're making a prison,
Yeah.
and there are little animals in the forest
I know.
of steel that is this prison. So how do you, I'm just curious about the influences, or how do you make choices about how to tell those?
Yeah, like
How do they are part
a
of the
lot of those
story?
narrative pieces we were talking earlier about just being intuitive or being logical, and my brain is sort of a bit of both. I have a kind of idea what I want, but as I start making it, it always changes. I don't know what's going to be positive, what's going to be negative, and I like to let things happen too. I'm sort of in the middle of that. So with these ones, I got a number of them where they're doodles for me. I just wanted to take an object and react to it. I wanted it to be some kind of prison cage type thing, but I wanted it to have a kind of what's the word? I don't want to. Well, ephemeral, like kind of a free-spirited. I hate that word, but free-spirited sort of feel to it.
Or, a little fae. Or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Well, a lot of them are characters I've used since as a kid drawing, just where characters just come out of my head. So I don't know where that comes from. This one I did for the University of Albany. I was a residency there and did this commission.
Is this another shipping container? Like, is this human scale?
This is it's human, the same height, but it's shorter. Okay. It was an ammunition container. It carried, ammo. And I called it Pall Cargo because a pall is a lace that hangs over a coffin.
Oh.
And then it has this natural ripple to it, so I went with that to give it, I wanted it to kind of look like a tablecloth over top of a table kind of thing, and it casts these great shadows from the top. But, yeah, that's the inside. Yeah, so now I'm using a plasma cutter at this point. Plasma cutters are better for thinner material, and the oxyacetylene is better for thicker material. It's really the difference.
This was the piece where I started thinking of Linda Berry.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, it's similar to the shipping container where and I had very limited amount of time to build this, so I drew it really fast and I cut it out as fast as I could, and I had a lot of problems along the way. This is a big, it's a steel culvert that's aluminized, has aluminum coating on it. And what I did is I cut it in half, but the problem with cutting it in half, I didn't realize it was constructed on a coil. So as I cut it in half, it just kind of sprung out of so this piece was a real hassle to make. And a hassle to put it together. We were talking about, so making big things can be problematic, carrying things around, but I always resolve that by cutting them into smaller sections and then piecing it back together later, because I'm super obsessed with being independent and doing everything myself, so I figure out how to do it myself. If it's got to fit into my truck, it's got to, so. But this one was a hassle because it does not fit together very well. So this is the Linda Berry references, I guess you see, eh? It's
just kind of a similar, just
cartoony.
A certain rhythm or something to it. So I'm kind of curious. We saw a person in that one, and you work on a lot of things that are human scale. And I love your work, and I've never seen it in person. I've only experienced it through images, but I have to imagine there's a difference between seeing it on something like a screen, or especially, we see so much through our phones these days.
Right.
I guess I've got kind of two questions here. One, is that something you have to navigate in this kind of increasingly digital world where more people are going to be experiencing this, not in person? And number two, what is it for you? What are you trying to give to the viewer? What is that experience like of walking into these spaces and getting to be in person with these works?
I never really thought, I'm not a very, I'm on Instagram, which I'm still really new at, and I don't look at these things that much. Because I prefer to be in spaces and look at things too. So I feel like I'm of the generation that maybe isn't as addicted to my phone as, I don't even actually turn my phone on. So I feel like other people's brains are very different than mine. I feel like things are too fast online, and even movies these days are too fast for me. I get dizzy. So I feel like my brain might be a bit different. I like to experience things in the world. I'm so old-fashioned, instead of staring at my phone. So I always get mad at everybody around me. I said, I'm only going to hang out with you if you put your phone away. I just can't take it. So yeah, I don't know. Materials are really important to me, and tactile and experiencing things. It makes me a little sad that people experience most things through your phone. But you can imagine, I think, right? I don't know what it would be like to see things in person.
I think so. Especially with kind of the sugar on the bodies.
Yeah.
I know what sugar feels like.
Right.
I know what dirt feels like. So dirt and sugar and these kind of more ephemeral pieces. I can imagine that.
Yeah.
But they are, for me, they do exist in images that I can revisit.
Right.
You know, they didn't
Yeah.
blow away from my space. I didn't watch them go through that kind of deterioration process.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think I do also have an imagination about spaces, and kind of working in metals myself, I have an imagination about the physicality of those
Exactly.
things.
Yeah. This is a drawing for a panty tank I did. Somehow I just really like the drawing. It's so weird. Oh yeah, here's some process shots of that as well. This is a 500-gallon oil tank. So this is in Nuit Blanche in Toronto, which is a 24-hour exhibition outside. And so it's a kind of a collaging of a lot of my older pieces, the different tanks and the I-beams I put together and lit for that, which was a lot of fun.
I have kind of a practical question for you. How do you choose what opportunities to say yes to and say no to, and kind of what's that been like over your arc from doing getting commissioned for I-beams, and then people
Yeah,
are like,
I don't know.
come to our We Love Lace show.
I know. Well, yeah, it's tricky. I don't really know. It's really if I like the person, if and the place. It's really just down to that. If somebody's rude to me, then I say no. That's basically it.
Okay.
That's the only. Yeah, I want to have a good time and experience a good time. So that's the only real. Yeah, I'm lucky because I'm very when I never thought I'd make money at art, so I, like Hunter was saying, I do it because I love it, not because I thought I was going to have an occupation in it, and it just sort of went that way. And so I'm also a very introverted person, and when I first started out, people saying, oh, you got to go to these shows and openings and meet these people to ever get anywhere. And I've just been super lucky that I haven't had to do that. I got one show, but that's the first show I think is really important to bust your ass on, the I-beam show. It was a very little budget. I didn't have a studio. I only had one tool. But it was a funny experience when I was cutting these I-beams that were all around 12 feet long and really thick. And when the curator asked me for the show, he didn't know what I was going to make. He came to visit me in the studio, and I had 3 of the I-beams done. And he just goes, oh. That's all he said, and he walked out. And I'm very self-deprecating. I went, oh no, it's not good enough. It's not big enough. Oh no. So I'd made 5 more like that. And he comes back and he goes, oh. And he goes, we need to hire an engineer to put. And I go, oh yeah, right. I guess we do. Yeah. And then we had to hire a crane to put it up, and yeah. So it was. He thought I was going to make 3 little doilies, which I didn't. I didn't realize that's what he thought I was going to do, but. But because I busted my ass and built this thing, it got written up in the Sculpture magazine, and it got me a scholarship to grad school. So it I think the first show does that, and then it got me all these other shows and all this, Chelsea Gallery and museum shows, and it just kind of kept going from there. And I could stay my introverted self.
Yeah, you haven't done a lot of collaborating, if any at all, and you don't work with assistants if you can help it.
No, I've had 2 assistants, just little part-time, just as they were students that wanted some to learn how to weld, basically. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because other people like Oldenburg and like Cyril Luxemburg and stuff like that, they're kind of designers that then are like, make the thing happen, technicians.
Yeah.
And I'm very hands-on, and you're a very hands-on worker too, but are you, especially as things get bigger, I know that you're having to start to look at some of those things. And is it kind of the size or the toll it takes on the body, or is there just tech that maybe you don't have, like you don't have the materials or the knowledge base or something?
Yeah, because you can't, sometimes you have an idea and you can't do everything, like I'm battling with that right now. Well, doing the upholstery on the workout bench because I'm not an upholsterer, but I still want to do it. So I'm figuring out how to do it properly. I probably should send that to a professional upholsterer just to get it done right, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing. But yeah, and I'm working on designing the facade of a building in Vancouver right now, and it's, you know, it's 200 feet long. I can't. It'll take me years to do that. So, so that's going to be laser cut, and I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not going to physically do any of that. It's too big. I don't have the right equipment for that. And I don't, like I was saying, I don't have any romance over the idea of doing something or not doing something, but the way I think and the way I work, I need to do it because one piece sort of leads to another. As I'm working on something, I get ideas. You know, I can't just sit there and go, oh, there's an idea. You know, I have to play with materials and do a lot of mistakes and make a lot of crappy art until something comes out of it. And keep going. That's, I think, a lot of artists have that problem of just keep going and not worrying about what the piece is going to end up being. Just the more you work, the more, like, I guess writers and musicians the same. You got to practice. You got to, you know, keep hashing out ideas and see where it takes you.
Yeah, and I think I know I don't always know what it is that's going to be the best end point. There's sort of a conversation that happens along the way with the materials.
Yep. And a lot of the pieces of mine that I don't like are pieces that other people like, and a lot of the pieces, So, oh yeah, so this is a sort of an installation piece I call Courting. It's a two. And I like this. It sort of reminded me of a religious painting. When these guys were putting it up, I thought, oh. Sort of worship the panties. Oh, this is a little video. I've been painting my own nails finally. And I thought it was sort of funny and sexual too. Just little titillating.
Yeah. It's like drawing the brush down the length of this is, there's something kind of sexy about it.
That's no porn. So I'm making large versions of these too. I'm getting them painted at the auto body shop, just the most bright. Because nowadays you just get so many awesome car colors, that are similar to nail polish. Yeah. But these ones are all nail polish. I have submarine fascination for a while. I was commissioned to cut up a submarine in the country of Montenegro, which the project never happened, but I did so much research on submarines, and the submarine that they gave me was a Russian-built Yugoslavian. It was in Yugoslavia. Built by the Russians and used by the North Koreans. So it had this very complicated story, this submarine. But the country of Montenegro, that used to be Yugoslavia, said no politics. So I thought, how am I going to cut up a submarine and not put politics into it? Right. So I found, they still had a lot of landmines around there at the time. And so I found this flower that was bioengineered into a bomb-sniffing flower that they would spread on the ground, and these flowers would grow, and if there was a landmine under it, it would turn red. So I used that as this lace motif on the submarine, which was even the president of Montenegro had to okay it, and they didn't need to know that it was kind of political. But so anyways, I did a lot of submarine pieces, drawings on wallpaper and such.
I have one more question for you, but I also want to make time for the audience questions. So, but let's do some audience questions first. We got one.
So with your sifted pieces, do you feel like the work was the installation or the work is the photo?
Yeah, it depends. The ones on the bodies were photos. The ones in the streets in DC were just, super temporary, because I think it even rained that night. But that one was also the experience of being in different places in DC. DC was sort of strange because it's very divided between rich and poor there. And so going to one section to the next and just meeting people, and some of the people would come and help me. There was a lot of conversation that happened there too. The gallery ones, just temporary installations that that people could walk into, so they'd be up for a month. I was always surprised that they actually lasted and not too many people walked through them. Occasionally it would happen. One installation, a mouse made a house because I usually put a pile of dirt at the end, and there was a couple little holes, and you see all the little mouse prints that went through it.
Oh, that's
I mean,
kind of nice.
Yeah, I loved it, yeah.
I bet the gallery wasn't thrilled, but that's kind of
No,
nice.
they liked it too.
Okay, good,
Most
good.
places are pretty easygoing about these sorts of things. Some people say, we have to get dirt that was in a package, it can't be from outside. Some places were like that and had to get packaged dirt. Make sure there's
Weird.
no bugs in it, I guess. I don't know.
Do we have any other questions? We got one way in the back over here.
The I-beams were 30 feet tall, around 30, 40 feet wide, and I used some of them to weigh it down too. Yeah, the entire structure was 30 feet high and about 30 or 40 feet wide, I guess. Yeah. The amount of time depends on the thickness of the steel. The I-beams took a bit longer because they're all quite thick. It was a bit slow going. You just got to be patient with that one. The thinner the steel, the quicker. So the shipping containers are pretty thin, and I can use a plasma cutter on that. So it goes fairly. I mean, it took a month to cut the full-size 20-foot shipping container. But I did quite big cuts, so it went pretty fast. The panty tank took longer because it's thicker steel and more intricate cuts. Yeah, and yeah, like we were talking about, like getting older, it's harder and harder to do it because my back has a lot of problems now and hands and things. So I am making more of a switch to the. Well, these are all, I've been painting on queen size mattresses lately. So this is my latest thing of doing all the bar flies on the mattress.
These ones are so kind of personal compared to.
Yeah.
The-
Well, these are
there's
my
this-
COVID. This is my COVID work, I guess.
Yeah. The kind of
It's hard to see it.
introspection that COVID demands.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, here's the subway.
Yeah, there we are.
Yeah.
Any more? Do we have any more questions? Oh, over here.
Yeah. My undergraduate degree was very around modernism. It's very modernist centric, and so light was a bad thing to do. Like you don't want theatrical sculpture. It has to be truth to materials. Has to stand alone. Can't be on a pedestal. It's like an object in the world, and lighting it made it too theatrical, I guess, and too. I think it took away from that. So for years, I never used it for that reason. And also because I used decoration. I didn't want it. I felt like the light made it a little bit too fanciful, I guess. And I wanted it to be like a strong, rugged, raw piece. I didn't want, shadows to, turn it into a lamp or something like that. You know what I mean? I wanted it to exist on its own as an object. But yeah, as you say, it was hard once I started lighting it. I'm like, oh my God, I love it. I love playing with the shadows too. So I'd like to somehow turn the shadows into something like an object as well. My two-dimensional pieces too, the paintings on the mattresses, the rust prints, I still kind of think of them as sculptures because they're more about material than about paint. I don't consider myself a painter when I'm painting. Consider myself using objects and paint as an object too. So it's more about the object itself as opposed to, yeah. But lighting, yeah. So I don't know. I have this sort of tentative relationship with light.
I made my living as a fabricator welder for quite a while, and I'm wondering, given the inherent problem solving that's just day to day within that and the necessity of deep development of the craft, how do you think that influenced your time at art school, and what impact do you think that's had on your career moving forward from there?
Yeah, I think because I worked as a welder for so many years, I kind of tried to to push metalwork aside for a long time because I had a complicated relationship with it. And yeah, again, I didn't feel like I was being free and creative by using my material that I use every day. But the actual craft part of it, I mean, that was part of my draw to building these sort of like the I-beams. You know, it was that sort of reaction against the Industrial Revolution, I thought, you know, because modernism because I was coming from a school of modernism, and that was about celebrating the Industrial Revolution. It was about, you know, having the handmade is a bad thing. You know, we want it to be slick. We want it to be about the machine made. But we're at a different time now where we're not celebrating those things so much for obvious reasons. And I thought, and the idea of craft was coming back in style in the art world too. You know, craft was not. It used to be a bad thing to be crafty. But so I was kind of poking fun at that too in the I-beams, poking fun of those at the sort of super macho world of the steel sculpture of the time of the 60s and 70s. And I don't know, you know, it was kind of making fun of that at the same time as sort of giving importance to something else.
Yeah, there's whole conversations we could have about that for sure.
Yeah,
That's a whole nother.
For a while there, I thought I would just talk about that experience of going through trade school. Was bizarre.
We have another
Hi,
question.
I got another question. So I'm no physical artist or anything, but I am a fan. I love seeing this work. I'm also a fan of the film Rivers and Tides. I think it was Andy Goldsworthy was the artist who worked with like twigs and icicles and stuff. And there's a lot of permanence in your work, and there's a lot of impermanence too. So I just kind of wonder, do you have like Zen thoughts while you're working on this stuff? Do you think about the difference between the permanence and impermanence of what you do?
Yeah, I do kind of. It does like it can be very Zen, but it's also very noisy and working this way, you know. But I put the helmet on and I got the earphones on, and so it does. Yeah, in a part I almost don't even remember doing it. I make a drawing and then I just zone out and I start cutting, and it just. This is why I can't get an assistant, because I don't know really how to get somebody to do that. Like, I mean, because I can't really plan ahead that much. But the permanent and impermanent, I don't know. Like I said, I like how I like to focus on being creative and not focus on making a sellable object. I guess that's what I like about just experiencing what happens. And I think I live my life in this kind of way too. Like everything I do, building things, my house, I got a weird house I live in because I'm changing it every day. Like I'm cutting things out and adding things, and it's just everything around me seems to be in process of change. And from the food I eat, cook, and to the house I live in, to the, I don't know, relationships I have, like it's all in flux.
It's all in flux. Well, I think that's about all we have time for. But Cal, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting
It's been a
me.
real pleasure to be able to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Can we say happy birthday? I don't want to do the whole song, but like a 1, 2, 3, happy birthday, Cal, okay? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Cal.